everyone, to week 3 of xEssentials Season 5. Tonight we have an exciting topic. Ron Howard of Extreme Sequences is going to be talking about Automagic. Not quite sure what that is, but Ron will explain more. Ron, you've got the floor.
All right, Ed, thank you so very much. It's great to be back at xEssentials, and I hope you guys take a lot away from this. Let me go ahead and share my screen and get my presentation going so that you can see everything that you need to. Beautiful. We have quite a bit to cover. The reason, and Ed asked a very good question, why do you call it Automagic? And the reason I call it Automagic is for someone like myself that does a lot of layout and design year over year, some of these features that have made creating layouts much easier for everyone are things that I just love about xLights, and the devs have just done an amazing job with it. And I've made lots of tutorials on this stuff, but I'm going to go over what I think are some of the coolest things and how I use it and how I think you can use it. I think there are a lot of things in here where people are not taking advantage of them for efficiency's sake. So especially for the new folks, maybe this will help you out. First of all, who am I? That's my family. I've got 2 older boys as well, one that turned 28 today and is leaving for Guatemala on Friday, so I'm a little bit nervous for him. And then I also have an 18-year-old. And I'm not the director, I'm not the kid actor, I'm not even that wealthy. I'm the owner of Extreme Sequences. I'm a mad-spirited sequencer. I'm the xLights hands-on instructor for the Florida Mega Mini this year and Christmas Expo last year and coming up this year, should we ever get a date for it. I have an Extreme Sequences Syndicate Facebook group. I've got a bunch of tutorials on YouTube that sort of set off with my venture all the way back in 2016, so you can see me making lots of mistakes and sort of make fun of me. And then I have a website where people can go see my work. So let's get into this very quickly. Anybody here remember 2016? Because I sure do. And it's when I started with xLights, and I thought it was the greatest thing under the sun because I could drag a line on the edge of a house and create a vertical or a horizontal and create windows. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I didn't have these features in Lightorama, and I never really took the time to learn Lightorama because it mostly just upset me because I didn't understand it. And I didn't know anything about groups or forums at the time. I was simply just trying to learn until I got into forums and groups. But it was maddening, absolutely maddening, because it was using absolute values. So if we have RGB, that's red, green, blue, that's 3 channels. And if I have a tree that takes 90 pixels, well, that's 180 channels. And you had to do a lot of things manually. And it was frustrating if you messed up, because if you were off by one channel, it could throw all your colors off all the way down the chain. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time in my office trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. Spreadsheets. Everybody had spreadsheets. People used to brag about spreadsheets the same way they brag about controller builds today in 2016. That's how important it was. It was fairly difficult to learn. There were many mistakes you were going to make, and if you had to troubleshoot, you would pull your hair out until you figured it out. Then 2017 came along, and I believe this is the year they started with universal addressing, and this was sort of like an epic jump or evolution for xLights, so that you could tell each prop just what universe to start at and what channel to start at. And as long as you didn't make mistakes down the line, you were okay. But it was still somewhat complicated. I say somewhat, but it was. Let me change my little mouse here so you can see this. If you look at this, see this 192.168.2.5.147? So 2.5 was the IP address scheme I was using at the time. .147 was the universe, and channel was 1. And so you had this absolute number here, this 54061, that was the absolute value. And then you come over here, and this was the end channel 255. If you mess this up, especially when you were daisy chaining, you could end up with problems. And David Pitts warned me not to do this. I had to put the IP address in there because I thought that would help me identify the prop to the controller. Worst mistake of my life, because what happens if you change the controller IP address or repurpose that controller and need a different IP address, then you're sort of breaking the chain, and that could be a real problem. So it was complicated. Still, it was still manual. A lot of people were still using spreadsheets. And then you created some bloat. Now, I never really worried about bloat. I had a beefy computer, so I wasn't worried about all the missing channels in between working channels. I didn't really care about those. But if you have a big enough show, it can make an impact. Then we get to today. I honestly, can xLights get any easier for layout and design? Bulk edit, alignment, distribution, resizing, locking, adding to groups, whether they're new or existing, importing previews, and setting current preview. We're going to go over all of these things. I just love to get through the slides so we can get to the exercise. But it's a different world now. Even the nice little logos with colors to differentiate the type of models is fantastic. You can see over here, start channels are based on controller names, not universes in channels per se. And then you can see the absolute values are still there. And we're going to talk about that in depth. Then the tools that matter. Bulk edit was the first one. Bulk edit still today, I think, is probably one of the greatest achievements for xLights as far as efficiency goes, because it can be used in just about everything, whether you're in the layout or you're in the sequencing window. Bulk edit, bar none, was one of the greatest features added to xLights as a sequencer in my world. So with bulk edit, we can activate, inactivate, controller name, tag, ports, port and increment. I'm going to show you how this works. Protocols, remotes, smart remotes, the different remote types, because there's a lot of people making remotes now. Controller direction, brightness, gamma, color order, null nodes, whether starting or ending, and then controller group counts, and previews and dimming curves. So there's a lot of things you can do that can save you time when you're putting together your layout or your sequencing. And here we go right down the list. I just mentioned all of these things. These here are some of the bigger ones for me that I use all the time. And then having control with ease. This little section right here. When auto layout models and auto size came out, I was skeptical at first. I remember having a conversation with Keith Wesley in Florida, and I loved the idea. His passion was this: for the new people, how do we make it easier for them to create layouts? Do they really need to know about universes and channels and addressing and all that stuff? And I said, yeah, I think they do, Keith. He goes, I disagree. And their argument ensued. And my belief that people should at least understand the difference between absolute and universal addressing is that it can help you troubleshoot if you get in trouble. For instance, your show may be running, maybe you updated and something doesn't work. Suddenly what worked with auto layout isn't a good idea. If you knew how to use universal, you could at least manually set it up with universal and get up and running. And how do I know this? It's happened to me. But these features right here are really critical. As a matter of fact, the default now will have all three of these checked, which will be the auto layout models, auto size, and full xLights control. Fantastic. So we just talked about these. Also the vendor model and variants, universe starts, visualizer, which we will take a look at, upload, input, and output, all that good stuff. So let's get out of here and let's get right into this home, this lovely home. whose OBJ file is somewhat messed up. If I move this around, well, I'll show you in the 3D, but it looks like bad construction on these wood planks up here. So we're starting fresh. I have no controllers. I have no layout. There's nothing in the sequence. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put some basic things on the house. And I'm going to do this as quickly as possible. And I'll talk about why I do it certain ways. This is 2D. It would take too long to do this all in 3D. So I'm going to do it in 2D. I like to give it a name. I like to give it a name with a number so I know which one it is. So this is Eve 1. I'm not worried about the nodes right now. I'll worry about that later. Okay, and then I'm going to click on this again, and then I'm going to click on this again. And I'm going to go up here, and then I'm going to go from here down here, and let's go over here. And then I'm going to go over here. That'll work. Cool, cool, cool. So now I need to deselect this. When you click it twice, it means every time you click on the window, you're going to create that model. So now I can come in here and finesse this as much as I like. There we go. It looks good. The other thing you're going to notice is that each one of these should have been given a different name, and they didn't. So Eve 1, let's just do this right. Let's make this Eve 2. In the 3D world, I would be copying and pasting from each of these because it will give its name to it. It would tell it Eve 3 or Eve 4. And let's do this, Eve 5. And let's do this, Eve 6. And that should be good. Cool. All right, so that's enough Eves. Probably what I would do, a lot of people ask, do you use the polyline tool a lot, Ron? And I don't. I know Gil, that's his baby, and I think it's wonderful for many things. But when it comes to outlining a house, I don't use it a lot. And the reason is, if this was a flat plane here, and I started here, then I hit my button here, and then I hit my button here, and hit my button here, then hit escape, I have one model. Now I have to go in and create submodels. Now, we all know what we put on here with the number of pixels is usually different than what actually goes on the house. So then you're going to be going back to your submodel, and you're going to have to change the numbers on all of these. I'll give you an example. So I'm going to use a polyline here. This would be a great place where I would use it because it's so short. I'm going to hit escape. That I don't really want this to be too separate. I just want it to be one line. But if we look over here into our individual segments, you click that and you hit this little arrow down, you'll see that you can specify the number of nodes for each. Now this is 25 and 25. What if I did want to create a submodel and say, I want this to be its own Eve, and this to be its own Eve, and then you put your lights on your house and you realize that this is 27 and this is 26. That's great. You're going to have to go into your submodels and change. You're going to have to go in here and change the number on both of these. So I find it easier and more efficient just to create lines, and then I can put these in groups. I just like that. And then I should probably give this a name. Why don't we just call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's just call this Eve 6, Eve 7. Thank you. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take this, Control C, Control V. Looks good to me. Let's move this puppy into place. And what's nice about this is it took this name, Eve 7, and it made this Eve 4. Oh, nice, nice. Oh, that's because it's going after this, I suppose. Anyway, so this is my garage. The same thing for my garage. Because I have verts and eaves, I still run these separately. I just like to separate them because I know when I measure, I'm going to be off on it. I just am. When I show you the 3D, I'm going to show you a measuring tool that I think everybody should use. And then I'll explain why you should be using it if you're using 3D. I know there's still a lot of people with 2D, and that's why we're starting here. So let's do this. I'm going to go create some verts. I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to drag down. And I'm going to call this vert 1. Great. Easy peasy. I'm going to take this. I'm going to paste this. I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste this. Put this over here. Now, what I like to do, since this one is exactly the height I want it, is I will select all of these. And I will right click. I will align to top. And what that will do is put them all on the same plane. If they were indeed on that same plane, if they're not, then we just take this and we drag this up appropriately where it should be. And then I'll do the same thing. Hold down your control key, click this, right click, align, top. And we should probably just bring this back down. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we could put as many verts as we want on here. You could put them on the sides here, but for the interest of time, I'm only going to do 2 more. I'm going to copy this, paste this, put this down here for the garage. That size looks fine. Paste 1 more, and that's enough for the verts. So we have our outlines done. Of course, I'm a bit OCD, so I would spend time in here getting this to butt up right next to it and just, trying to nail it. So we'll just put some windows on here now. So the window tool, drag your window. If only it were this easy in 3D. And it's not. So what I'm going to do here is control copy. Well, actually, let's do this. Let's give it a name. Window 1. All right. So I've got window 1. I need 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. So I'm going to do control copy, control V, control V, control V, control V. Then I'm going to select this window. I'm going to hold down control key and select all of these. I'm going to right click, align, top. Then I'm going to take these 2, control. Now let's move you over. And if you make a mistake, if you just get it left and right and you're happy, not a problem. You can still click on the window that's correct and line them up. Looks like we're going to need 1 more. We are. So just get them left and right. Control copy, control V. Get it centered. Oh, I see what happened. Yes, delete. Let's scoot you over. There we go. I did have 5 windows. I had it hiding in the shadows there. There we go. So you take the good window, and that's all you need. You just need one that's positioned correctly. Then select the others. Right click, align, top. Simple, simple. Okay. So where do we make the mistake here? And I see people do this all the time. 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm just going to tell you, we won't do it again. I guarantee you this is not 16 by 50. The 50 is a default. So what I would do is make sure you make your first window the correct size, copy, paste, get it centered, and push it up to where it needs to go using the automation. This will just save you so much time. Okay. All righty, so that looks pretty good. Let's do something kind of fun. Let's say that we put a controller under here, and we wanted to start the controller and give it 4 outputs: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I don't know if I'd be running a line all the way over here, but let's just say that that's what we want to do. We want one port for each window. And let's say the windows are 1 inch spacing, so we're going to have all this resolution, so it makes sense to do that. So we're just sort of pretending. So first thing we need to do is we're probably going to need to have a controller, right? So I'm going to go over to the controller and set one up. I never worry about putting a controller in until the house is done. So we'll say the house at this point is done until we get to the 3D, and there's a little bit more on there. So let's say we want to put these on a controller. So I'm going to go to my controllers. Save this. I'm going to add Ethernet. I'm going to go ahead and put on here, what do you want? Culp, Falcon. We can put on anything you like. So let's go Culp, and I'm going to just call this house. Main house. Auto size is set. Great. We have to tell it who the vendor is. So we click on the drop down, and let's just tell this. We want Culp lights. What are we going to put up there? Let's say we're going to put up there an F32. That's going to cover a lot. So as soon as you put in a vendor in the model, you have more windows that will automatically activate, and they will have already been checkmarked for you. That is auto layout models, auto size, and xLight's full control. I was very confused about xLight's full control for the longest time, and I just didn't use it. But I figured out very quickly why you do and should use it. I don't turn on upload auto configuration at this point. The next thing we have to do is we need to give it an IP address, and how about that works for me, and tell it what universe to start on. If you have follow machines and you have waving Santas and moving heads and a bunch of this stuff on DMX, I would recommend not starting your show for your pixels on universe 1. I would set that to 2. Because a lot of the DMX stuff is going to behave a lot better for you on the lower channels. And if you exhaust 512 channels for your AC, you've got a pretty big show. So I like to start on universe 2. And now I'm happy. I'll click save. We'll go back over here. One of the cool things that was introduced this last year was the ability to take advantage of bulk edit with multiple models. So bulk edit, controller name, Culp. So that's cool. They're all on Culp. If we go back to our controllers and we look at Visualizer, we can see all these eaves, we see all the windows. Now we can drag and drop and all this kind of stuff, and I know people love the Visualizer. It is really cool, and I use it a lot, but you don't have to drag and drop these windows. You can do that. Let's close this window. We can just do this from the layout. If you know it's going to be output 1, 2, 3, and 4 of that controller, just select all of these. Now, you can select them this way, or you could just go over to your left window and hold down your shift key and select them all. Either works. Right click, bulk edit, port, and increment. When you click this, we get a window. First thing it's going to ask you is what's the protocol? We hope all the windows are on the same protocol. If they're not, there are ways you can adjust that on the controller. But you get to tell us what port it starts at. So if you were starting this on port 3, that's fine. But we're going to start on port 1. We click OK. We click Save. Go back to our controller tab. Let's test this. Is that really what happened? And it is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It used ports 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's a quick way. Nothing wrong with dragging and dropping at all. As a matter of fact, I'd probably do all of these the same way. 1, 2, 3, and then if we were going to daisy chain anything, you just drag it next to it. If we were going to daisy chain this, and then E, there we go, and then vert, We'll just throw these guys all on here so that they have a home. And the cool thing is, you can always change your mind. It's completely up to you. What you design in your show at the beginning of the year versus what is reality by the time you put controllers up and mine, screw it, things will change. But the beautiful part of this is everything has a controller name associated with it. All xLights cares about is where does the prop belong? What controller do you want it on? And what port number do you want to put it on? That is it. That's as simple as it gets. Now, granted, there are a lot of things we could do with bulk edit. We could change all the protocols. We can mess with the smart controllers, dumb controllers, the direction, the brightness, and this is sort of a big one here. One of the things I like to do with brightness is just select everything. I'll right-click, bulk edit, brightness, and then I'm going to set it, and my show runs at 20%. That simple. If I had selected everything and I had a P5, I would just deselect the P5 and make sure everything else is selected, and we'd be good to go. And now we have our schematic with visualizer that we can print, take with us outside, or just, remote in and see what goes where. This is just brilliant. And on top of that, this gives you so much information. And it will even attempt to tell you what it thinks it's going to draw amperage-wise based on the brightness and the number of pixels. So if we had something on here crazy and you're seeing, 15, 20 amps, you might want to reevaluate your configuration. Okay? As always, tools check sequence is something that you should frequent often. When you get in a bind and you're not sure what's going on, this is going to tell you the truth. Do you have a problem? This will tell you. You're looking for errors. You're looking for overlap. The beautiful thing about using the automation with the auto size and xLights full control is it's doggone near impossible to have overlapping models. Can you? Yeah, you just got to work extra hard at it. And of course, your overlap check's enabled here. If you had something that was overlapping and you click on it, it's going to turn red. You're going to see it. This is a lot more critical for larger shows where you just put a lot of work into it and you got some things messed up. A lot of times you'll see that happening with daisy chaining, and that's pretty normal. Another thing with the arches, I know a lot of people love to come in here and just tell it, let's do layered arches, and let's do 100 nodes, and let's do 3 layers. Okay, and we have to tell it how many there are per. So we're going to say 100 for the inside, 100 for the middle, 100 for the outside. So there we go. There's your triple arch. Okay.
Well, there was a question in chat. It said, how come the brightness didn't change? I'm not sure how long ago that was, but...
okay, good question. The brightness is for the brightness of the pixel output, not what's on the screen. If I want to change brightness on the screen of the house, I can change that here under brightness. We'll take that to 10%, and that mutes the house way back. But the purpose of selecting all of these, right-clicking, bulk edit, brightness, What this is doing, this is telling the models that they're going to be 20% brightness. And when you upload to your controllers, whether it's a Hinks Pix, an Alpha Pix, Flex, Alpha Pix, Falcon, Culp, it doesn't matter. All of those controllers, it's going to send over data that says, hey, this is 20%. This is why it's better to set your brightness levels in X-Lights and not on the controller, because what you have in X-Lights will override what's in the controller. Okay. Also, earlier, I had already cheated and created a ruler that I'm going to show you how to do in the 3D world. And one of the things that I think is great that was added was dimensions by using the ruler. The length of this is not 114.99 feet. It is 6 feet. And maybe that doesn't work in the 2D world. That's what I'm starting to think. Anyway, let's just get that looking halfway decent there. It looks really small. Let's just get you right here. So again, the same thing here. Control copy, Control V, Control V, Control V. And let's see, how many do we have of these? Arch 1, 2, 3, 4. That looks good. I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to right click, bulk edit, and I'm going to actually align to the top. And I'm going to start scooting these out. Oh, not you. There we go. So there's something really cool about this that I really, really love, especially if you're meticulous with your shows. What we can do, we know we can select all of these. Whoop. And we can right click and we can align top. But the spacing on the left and right is what I want. And I don't want the spacing. And now I have to manually, and when I manually move them over or I arrow them over, I'm sort of guessing, right? So if I just grab, and this is the winner, and I right click and I go to distribute horizontal, watch what happens. Oh, look at that. That looks much better. So you can distribute horizontally and vertically the spacing. That's kind of a neat thing. I wish I had had that long ago. Cool. All right. And just to let you know, my reference to 2016, I'll give you a snippet of why that was sort of painful for myself and maybe a lot of people. And that's because in the start channel, and by the way, this is set to no controller as a default when you create models, and this is brilliant. It's called no controller now, so you don't have to hide it and put it in other views or give it some obnoxious high channel number so it doesn't interfere with anything. Just leave it on no controller until you figure out where it has a home. Okay. So let's look at this. Let's give it a cult controller, and then let's do this. Let's tell us we want to use start channels. And in the start channel, many of you will recognize the screen. I hope you rarely go here, because when I started in 2016, it was sort of this. And then 2017, we had the universal, but you never want to put the IP address in there. You just want to put, #, the universe number, colon, and then the channel, and that was it. End of model. These things are definitely useful for other reasons. Certainly shadow models. I've done tutorials on that, or a tutorial on that, and it's been incredible. I think shadow models is an amazing thing to learn if you have a specific need for a pixel matrix that you want to wire a certain way, or if you have a couple of the GE models like Mother of All Reads or the Grand Illusion, and want to split up pixels a certain way, shadow models will save your life. All right, let me cancel out of this, because this is the world I remember living in early on, and no more, no more, no more, no more. All right, let's get out of here and let's transition into our 3D. And Ed, if there are questions, I'll need you to feed them, because, oh, actually I can see them now. We'll revisit, and then you can ask me questions. All right, let's keep going. So here's my 3D layout, and you'll see now if I turn this, I don't know what's up with this OBJ file, but it's sort of got issues. So we'll just get it looking as best we can. I took the time to set up all of these just to have something on here, and also to have a model. This is the Rosa Grande, named after my wife, except the Grande part, otherwise she'll kill me. So I at least should know it. I don't have any controllers, nothing like that. I can put in controllers, but why don't we do this? Why don't we put in, add Ethernet, let's go with Falcon F48, and we're gonna call this main house. Yep, looks good. Auto size, we can't do that until we give it a vendor. So we tell this is Falcon. We have to give it the model. If this were an F16, you would also have to give it the variant. Is there an expansion or two expansions? It wants to know that. Now these are all three selected automatically for us, which is fantastic. Default port brightness. So here's another thing that you can do. If you know all the ports on this for all these models, it's going to be 20%, then you can also just put it in here. Just another way to save you some time later. Just brilliant. So 192.168.1.77, sure, we'll keep that. And we are done, but except I want to start this on Universe 2 because I might have some DMX in my show, and we'll save that. And let's add one more controller. Add Ethernet. Let's just put up here a Hinks Pix Pro. I work with these every year. I know what you think, and I've had to learn a lot about these. Yard. And there were a lot of people last year that could not get Culp or Falcon, and they were able to get Hinks Pix Pros. So supply and demand, sort of an important thing, I suppose, in our hobby. And so I'll go over here to our Hinks Pix. There we go, the model. This needs to be the Pro. And we will start this on Universe, I don't know, 100. Doesn't matter. I could make this Universe 1000. Wouldn't matter. And we'll save that. So I have a couple of universes here. Actually, what did I just do here? Universe, oh, there you go. That was weird. That took a second to lock in, didn't it? Universe 2 start, Universe 100 start, go back to our layout, and we're ready to rock and roll by doing things. If you hold down your Shift key in the 3D world and drag from left to right, it will grab everything. Just deselect the P5 panel. We don't want to be given that an output number. Right click, bulk edit, controller name, and let's make this the F48. Click OK. At least they all have a controller. Now, if we want, we can go over to our controllers tab, click on the F48. Just one, please. And now we can start assigning these any which way we want to fill in. Okay, well, we're about doing that right now. The same thing with Hinks Pix Pro. I should probably give it an IP address. And that looks good. Save that. And the upload output button here. If you see upload input and upload output, there's no reason you should do that. You can upload input and output at the same time. It's in preferences. That's the very last tab. You can select a box there that will allow that to be one. So if we go to other, right here, inputs and outputs, I would turn these both on. And then we won't get into the rest of this, but they're all important. That way, every time you hit upload output, it is actually sending the E131 first, and then it will send right away the output, which are the output connection ports to your controller. and it works great, whether it's Falcon, Hinks Pix, Culp, they all work pretty much the same way, including dealing with the brightnesses. Okay. All right. Although on the Hinks Pix, I'm not seeing brightness on here. So that's sort of interesting. And maybe that's just something that's not capable of happening with that controller as it is with the F48, where you have default port brightness. So different controllers may vary along the way. So just pay attention to that. And great. And then if we want to put a mega tree over here, whoa, man, I wish I had that space mouse now. Oh my goodness. No, 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 no. If you ever, by the way, if this ever happens to you in 3D, just right click and there should be a reset, and that'll sort of bring you back. And what I'm going to do with this mega tree is delete it and start again and see if I can get something that looks a little closer. Maybe not. I'm just not going to do a mega tree. I'm going to be a trendsetter and just say no mega trees and delete you. We ain't got time for mega trees in this session. All right, let me think if there's any other trips. Well, actually, yeah, there's a few things. There's a reason I put this Rosa Grande on here. It wasn't for kicks and giggles. When we're talking about our layouts, we have to sort of think about the end in mind, right? It's one thing to know I've got the right controller, I've got the right ports. Now it's time to figure out, am I going to do my own sequencing? Am I going to get free sequences? And am I going to purchase sequences? And if I do any of the latter two, you need to know how to map. And great. So you want to set yourself up to succeed at mapping. And a lot of people overthink this. Yeah, a lot of people. And by the way, I'm still an E131 guy unless it's a matrix. So if you're wondering why I'm not talking about DDP, is because I don't use it. E131's worked for me all these years, so I'm sort of set in my way with that. But on the layout, when we look at things like this particular prop, this model has a lot of submodel groups. So as you start bringing in models, some of these, if you have Gilbert Engineering models, the submodels, you could have 15, 16, 20 of them in there. And the hierarchy of these models matter when you're mapping sequences. All the vendors use different models, and there are different ways that they have put these in order. And so you're going to need to be able to adjust for that. So let's say I was going to import another. And I'll drag a box over here. Okay, it doesn't look like that's going into space. And I'm going to go into my models, and I'll bring over the Space Odyssey. And I'll open this up, and there it is. Beautiful. Now, I mentioned to you earlier, let's see how big this is. Space Odyssey looks a little too big, I think. It should be 4 feet by 4 feet, roughly, and it's not. Now, I could click here and right click and resize, match size, but I don't want to do that. I want it to be actual size. So this is something, certainly if you're doing 3D, that I think everybody should do, and it's really simple. We need a measuring line. And all we have to do is go to our 3D objects. We were in models, we go to our 3D objects, and we add an object, and we want a ruler. This ruler is here on the house somewhere. Sometimes it's better to turn it, lower it, scoot it over, get it as close to the surface as you can. We are going to measure the edge of the garage. Typically, garages are right around 16 feet. Now, if I click on the right handle, come on. Boom, boom, there we go. All right, you're just going to be a booger, aren't you? How about the left handle? Left handle's working. There we go. You can measure just about anything, because all we're trying to tell X-Lights is this measurement is 16 feet. So we're going to go over here and we're going to tell this that this is feet, not meters, unless you want to. And it's 16. By doing that, we now have a new item in our layout. We got to get out of models, go to our layout, and we will see if I click on this line up here and we scroll down, we have controller, connection, string properties, appearance, but now we have dimensions. And this measured 16.22 feet. Cool. Well, I want it to be 16 feet. It would be really accurate, right? So the cool thing about this is, I know this model up here is way too big. So I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to tell it that this is actually 48. Oh, you know what? It's 4 feet. That's why I messed up on the tree. I was thinking inches. 4. Don't worry about depth. Click out of it. Now we have a properly sized model that we can put anywhere we want. Maybe this is going to go inside here. "3D is one of those things you have to have the patience for. But once you get used to it, it's sort of fun, a little therapeutic until things go catawampy, and then you just use choice words and get on with your day. So that's 4 feet by 4 feet, roughly. So that's a great way. And the reason this is important and why I think people starting off with shows when their layout and designing aspirations are kicking in, and they've been inspired by all these great people out there with great big shows, is try to be realistic with your show. And the reason for that is you could decorate your show, and by the time you start adding models to your home, your physical home, all these props, you're going to realize, oh man, I don't think I measured that right. There's no way this is going to fit. Or these are tiny. I didn't think I had that much room. What am I going to do to fill in this area? So this gives you a pretty good representation of what to expect. And it's a very simple thing to do with 3D to create a quick little ruler. You can measure a window. It doesn't matter. As long as that's really what it is, then you're golden. One last thing before we take some questions. And that is in the sequencer. I talked about this having a lot of submodels, which it will do. They're all up here. There's Rosa Grande and then Space Odyssey. I think there's 18 or 19. I'm going to create just a, save changes and cancel that. Let's not save. Let's create. No. What am I doing here? Oh, I don't have anything open in here, do I? Oh, I do. Okay. I have a window open already for sequencing. So in our sequencing window, this is just an animation, which only goes to 30 seconds. You'll see that there's an order here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to discard changes, animation, done. And so we will have everything in here. But are they in order? What's at the top? I guarantee you, many group spokes, it's not supposed to be at the top. It should be GE Rosa Grande group. So if you have 2 of them, or even 1, I sequence at the group level, even at the main model level, because I can do a lot more with it. And I do the same with all of my model groups. So these are not in the right order at all. So a lot of the sequencers will give you a PDF or something to say, okay, this is the order it should be in. So follow this and be on your way, but maybe not all. And so there's an easier way. And I believe Scott Hansen made this possible, if I'm not mistaken. And this is absolutely brilliant. So let's go into our edit display elements. And this is where we decide what goes where in what order. And this order is important. I always say your all house should go at the very top. All pixels group, whatever you want to call it, that should be at the very top. That way, anything you do underneath it will isolate that and separate it from the main group, unless you have allow blend mode turned on, and then that's a whole different discussion. But typically, the main whole house group or all pixels group will go at the top. But with these high density models, it's important that these be in the right order for that specific vendor. Let's say if you purchased a sequence. So how can we get these in order without manually doing it? And it's simpler than you think. And on top of that, if you're getting stuff from PPD, Extreme Sequences, Tom Bet George, or anyone else, there's no reason why you can't have multiple views up here and name them by the vendor of that sequencer that you're getting them from. So that when you're mapping sequences from that vendor, you go to their world and it puts everything in the right order for you based on how they sequence. That's just working smarter, not harder. So with these models, all I have to do, I have a choice. When I import, let me do this. Let me think how I want to do this. We can import the actual vendor's layout for the hierarchy of these groups from one of two ways. From a layout file, which would be the RGB effects, or from the actual sequence. And sometimes the sequence might make more sense, but I typically will use the RGB effects because the RGB effects are going to have everything possibly. If you have matching models and they're the same name, then they're going to put them in that exact order. And that's why it's important to have multiple views. So if you have something for PPD and you've named all your models to be their same model names, then it's going to be easy peasy. So I'm going to tell this from a layout file. And then all I have to do is go find that layout file. Let's click on Howard Christmas Light Show, Christmas 22. If I double click on this, and this is my show directory, all I have to do is scroll down to the RGB effects file. So this is the original sequencer. This is their world in which they created the sequence that you want to map from. You click open, and it's going to say, great, do you want this to be the main sequence view? Yeah, or you can call it whatever you want. Click OK. Here's my main sequence view. Now we have all pixels at the top. We have GE Rosa Grande group, and this hierarchy of these high density models or submodel groups are in the same exact order. Now I don't have the Space Odyssey in that show right now because I'm doing other things with it, but it puts everything in the exact order. This is absolutely critical if you're mapping sequences. What you have to do is, oh, it's right here. Hello, hold down the button, Ron. What you have to do is you have to activate it. So main sequence view, you have to make master.
There you go. Okay, that makes sense.
Once you make that master, there's only one view that's ever working. Master view is the only one that ever works. These are basically templates that can become master view at any time. Once you do that, then everything here works the way it's supposed to.
Now it works correctly.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. That would have been a huge mess, right?
So I have a question on that. So you said bringing sequences in from multiple people, setting up views, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if pardon me?
You can do that.
If you do that and you only have one master view and you render, it's going to render from your existing master view that you have. In other words, you could buy a purchase sequence that renders from the master view from who created it, which may be different than yours, right?
Right, except you get to decide what's the master view. If I had this, Extreme Sequences, TBG in here, and I'm like, okay, here's a Tom Bet George sequence I'm going to pull in. I click on that, make master, and then I'd import. Oh, I've got an Extreme Sequences. Okay, I'm going to click on that, make master, and then I'm going to import.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't clear. A lot of times we get questions. I got somebody's sequence and I render and it doesn't look the way it does on the video. Why is that?
There could be a lot of reasons. One of the big ones is allow display or allow blending mode, which xLights by default in the preferences has allow blend mode turned off. Whoa, where are we at? Sequences. So this is disabled, but if somebody turns that on, what happens is all the groups, the all pixels group will bleed into all the groups below it, which can be very useful and artistic. And I use it here and there, but sparingly, because I want to have complete control. But there are times where you want things to bleed over and you can control that. It's neat, but a lot of times people will somehow have that enabled, and then it comes over and it doesn't look right. Or the opposite. It should be enabled, but it's disabled. Now they're not seeing all the cool things come across the home with some of the whole house effects. Typically, it's used a lot with whole house effects.
Right. Thank you.
You bet.
So, Ron, can we dumb this down, your presentation, a little bit? What are the steps that somebody should take? So once they bring their picture of their house in, they should lay out the props that they want first, then group them, then do what? And like controllers, I generally think like controllers is one of the last things you kind of do, and you got to kind of figure it out. But maybe you could just walk us through some of the things if somebody's just starting fresh. What should they do?
Yeah, Ed, great question. So what I think worked for me is to have the house layout, figure out if you're in 2D or 3D, and then you've got to build the picture. You need to put all the props on. I don't worry about the controllers until I'm done with the layout design. If the client is happy and I really like it, then they're like, great, let's do it. And then I tell them how many pixels it is. They're like, oh, okay, let's still do it. I mean, that's sort of what happens year over year. And some people will say, look, I only want 10,000 pixels, and then I build it. For people that are doing this on their own, build your dream layout. Be careful with pixel density on things like eaves and verts. A lot of people might start with 3-inch and 4-inch spacing, and the next year they're like, oh, I'm going to go to 2-inch spacing. My suggestion would be start with 2-inch spacing, because you can make 2-inch spacing look like 3 and 4-inch spacing, but you cannot make 4-inch spacing look like 2-inch spacing. So it's no fun redoing your show the next year, the investment you put in there, and you've got to pull pixels out and redo it all. So just sort of design your show with the end in mind. The next thing is you don't have to start with 3D. It might be better unless you have a side-facing yard or a side facing on either way, to stay in 2D, put it all together, and then when you get comfortable with it, maybe transition to 3D at that point. Once you transition to 3D, it's just a matter of moving the models, and you're going to need to have some time and patience when you do that. It's a bit more cumbersome than working in a 2D world where it's very fast to move things. And you can zoom in and zoom out. And if you hold your mouse button down, you can move things all around in 2D and 3D. And all these things really, really help.
Now, somebody who's on a budget, what are some of the things that they should do? Is it verticals, horizontals, a mega tree, a high density? What are the things that you can be the most impactful? But save a buck.
Yeah, I think eaves, verts, windows, candy canes. You can forego the matrix and do that year 2. Put some basic flakes on there. Just really all you're going to do your first year is inspire yourself, and the addiction will kick in year 2. You'll let it all hang out. You'll start really going nuts. It happens every year. The big uptick over the last couple of years are people, they used to start with 5,000, 7,000 pixels, and people now are starting with 50, 60, 75, 100,000 pixels, and it's their first show. I've just done a bunch of them, and I try to talk people out of it many times, and because they've got to do all the work, and you have to be realistic. If you have a very demanding day job or night job, you're EMT, you're on call, whatever it might be, you have to be realistic with your time, because if you design your dream layout but you don't have time to poke the pixels, you're not going to get everything up on time. This is not a seasonal hobby where you can start in September and have a great show in December. This starts in the springtime, the planning and education is January, February, and March. Between that, you need to be testing controllers and getting controllers and learning as much as you can about this, because when it's time to troubleshoot, the Zoom room is great and other places to help you, but they're not going to be there holding your hand on the ground. And you're going to have to think quick on your feet. So I would be sensible with it. An F16 with 16 outputs can do a lot of damage with the show in covering all the bases. And then think about an F48 where you can use a distributive, sort of a hub and spoke method for sending these receivers out to the point of consumption, which I use on a house, which I think they're the greatest thing. Using receivers on a house attached to an F48 is just a win-win. When you get into the high density stuff, it's more pixels, it's more power, it's more wires. You have to think about how you're going to wire it and be somewhat meticulous and sensible about how many ports you're going to use. All these things you'll learn along the way in your journey. But when you're starting off, if you don't have a budget and you just want to go for it, you're probably going to need some help.
So for help, do you have free classes like every other week, or don't you have one night a week or something that you kind of have a help session or something in your group?
Yeah, every Thursday we have Extreme Talk, and we start at 5 o'clock. And the first hour we will dedicate to any troubleshooting if anybody needs it. Not a ton of it, but then people will join in later and go, "Hey, I have a question," and we'll take any challenge.
And that's 5 Eastern. What time? 5
Pacific.
5 Pacific, 8 Eastern.
And then the call usually ends at 2 or 3.
And then you also have a library on YouTube, or where do people have your video resources?
Yep, that's in the presentation. So my YouTube channel, which you can get from my site, xEssentials.com.
Yep.
And then my Facebook group, and I have hundreds, just a lot of videos. And the funny thing about the videos, Ed, and the tutorials, what was relevant in 2016, parts of it are still relevant today, but maybe 50 to 75% of it certainly is not. I still have people messaging me in YouTube going, "Hey, I really love that. How did you do that?" I'm like, "Oh man, that's 2016."
Right. Yeah.
But it happens.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Ron. Anybody else have any other questions for him before we move on for announcements?
This is Alan. I'd like to ask a question or add a comment about
Go right ahead.
which order you do things in. And I'm new at this, so I could be wrong, but maybe a good tip. I added my house and in the layout, and then put my props on it. And I've been building props during the day, like my window frames, for example. And then at nighttime, I've been playing with X lights. Mm-hmm. And I want to bring in sequences. I want to import some or build my own effects and whatnot. But one thing that I realized, or I think I realized, is that if you just drag a window frame around your window and you don't know how many pixels are in your verts and your horizontals and all the way around, and you start building subgroups for your sequences, you find out later that you have to kind of redo all that stuff, I think. So
you do.
For me, a good tip is make sure you know exactly how many pixels are going to be around your windows and what are the verticals and what are the horizontals before you start doing your sequencing.
Yeah, it's very true, because if I want to create, and if I'm starting at the bottom, you're going to create this. You can put the numbers in if you know what the numbers are. And this is pretty quick way. But anyway, whatever numbers you create here, and then you end up adding 3 more pixels to the entire window, you have to redo this. Top, bottom, left, and right. So you're absolutely 100% right. Something I would love to see in X-Lights is for it to know somehow how to adjust, but I just don't know if that's possible, because X-Lights doesn't really necessarily, I guess it would know that you added more this way, but where it starts, I don't know. It'd be cool. But I tell people all the time, I need measurements. And then they're always going to come back and go, "Hey, Ron, that was actually only 19, not 20. And then I'm thinking, well, you should have just built it for 20. And if it stuck out a quarter of an inch, who cares? Or an inch or 2 inches. It's just a window. It's nighttime. No one's going to see the edge. But I mean, that's the detail that you have to have when we're working with these type of models. So verts, eaves, windows, icicles, knowing the right number. It's not uncommon that you'll start with icicles. You think it's going to be 340 here, and it turns out being, 350. And then you've already created the submodels, which is, with the icicles, it's not that bad because you can go back in there and doctor those up. You're just going to redraw the lines for the eave, and then you're just going to grab all the cells for the drops and drag to the right, and you're done. That's pretty fast. But the windows, that's not as fast. Good question. Good observation.
Anybody else?
Ron, question in chat about how to take advantage of your Thursday evening class thing.
It's posted every morning or whenever I get to it. I'm up a lot more early these days. That's another story. But
you're referring to your Facebook group, I'm assuming?
Yeah, the Facebook group. Yeah, if you're in that Facebook group, all you have to do is answer 3 questions to get in there. And I think 2 of them are yes, no. No, one's yes, no. I want to know your favorite Christmas or your favorite song, and then what inspired you to get into lighting. And if you can just answer 3 questions, you get in there and hobnob with the rest.
So
Ron?
go to Facebook, do a search for Extreme Sequences Syndicate, I believe, and
Yes.
join his Facebook group.
Correct.
Hey, Ron, sometimes it's really difficult for someone to answer more than one question. You'd be surprised how many people don't answer any questions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anything else? If not, we're going to go into announcements.